don't realize that Ohio, the east and the south part of Ohio, is actually part of Appalachia. 100 miles both ways. And beautiful country. I've been down to their conference 3 or 4 times. You assume most of Ohio is flat farm ground, but it's not. It's got some beautiful country both on the east and the south. Okay, here's my really technical question. How many of you have come because your spouse or family or significant other is into Bigfoot, but you came to support him or her in their weird hobby? I thought there was, hey, we ought to give these guys a hand, don't you think? Thanks for supporting your Bigfooters, okay? My wife's a wonderful person, but she's only been to 2 conferences with me. Okay, I want to introduce our committee. We've been really fortunate to have a great committee here. If these guys would raise their hands, Bruce is actually from Kentucky. If you talk to him, you know he's definitely from out of state, but he's lived down by Detroit for about 30 years. Moved up here about 3 or 4 years ago and connected with me, and we've done a bunch. We went to Oklahoma for their conference there 3 or 4 years ago. MN.B.R.T is a professional musician right there. I'll put a dot on, okay. He's been our big sound man and our internet. If you'll notice, if you've been on the internet, he's done a great job with our internet site, which is MN.B.R.T, etc., etc. So he got off a cruise ship not very long ago playing music, and I'll be surprised if he don't get back on one shortly after this, but I don't know. John Young, there is John. He's an expert at the local table of knowledge, one of the local restaurants. I asked him to be on our committee, and he, he's an open-minded type of fellow, and he never really did Bigfoot, but he's been a big help in organizing this. Amanda Charles, back here, she's on a Chamber of Commerce, and she's never had much experience, but she says, it's really a hot topic. So we got to study Bigfoot. She's been a big help through the Chamber. Michelle Schwinkler, she's with the Road Commission. About 3 weeks ago, I put on a program for the district or area road commission, and they wanted to sort of see my program. I think they wanted a little humor in their program, and she says, hey, I could help you with that a little bit. She's a computer whiz for PowerPoint, and where I'm pretty much a dunce. But most of the graphics and everything in here is her input. She's done a great job and really helped with that. Randy Crocker, is he here? No? Randy owns a Sears store in town, and he came real good to a few of our first meetings, and he's been gone about 3 weeks. We don't know if he went to Hawaii because he really wanted to go to Hawaii, or whether he was just trying to avoid being on this Bigfoot committee. But we haven't seen him in about 3 or 4 weeks, so I don't know. Draw your own conclusion. Is Dave Hickman here? I don't think so. Okay. Gonna get right into my Bigfooting experience. Of course, you all know the Patty pictures there. As you know, there's many mysteries yet. Our modern people with our communications and transportation, medicine, we've come so far in the last 40, 50 years. We sort of assume we know it all, but there's still UFOs and Loch Ness and cougars. I just can't believe the number of cougar reports. Now looking back, I wish I kept. You've seen one.
There was one killed up in Detroit area just the other day on the expressway.
Seriously, okay. And that one that traveled all the way from North Dakota to Maryland, he must have got hit on the way back, you think?
Yeah. Park area, I think it was.
It's amazing, because, I wish I kept track of all the reports, because every time I give them about 25 Bigfoot conferences, and almost always somebody's seen cougars around here. So, they got to be here. Even if they're not getting run over, if they're finally run over one. So, yeah. Of course, most people think Bigfoot just can't happen. You know, where would they hide? I said the place where John frequents there just a week or two ago, and we meet our committee meets in the back room, and this guy sits across me. He says, you know, there's a committee in the back room that's meeting and talking about Bigfoot. I mean, what they tell? I mean, what would they eat? You know, I don't know if I had the right response, but in my opinion, they can eat just about anything they want. So, but I think they eat a lot of vegetation, and we have a lot of vegetation. I've been just intrigued by the Bigfoot phenomena, and it's been a great retirement hobby. Just about when I retired, it's when I started getting into this. I don't want to scare you guys who are working, but I don't know in today's job market whether you'd want to admit you studied Bigfoot the way it is. My history is my wife and I think we saw one in New Brunswick in 2006. We were driving through wooded country, the East Coast. If you've never been there, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and we went up to Quebec and back around, and just beautiful country. Going through New Brunswick, there was an opening in the trees. We saw a biped. We didn't see any clothes, face. It was only 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I was driving, so my wife actually probably had a better look at it. She said it walked funny, but we agreed we saw one. We got home and told our 3 sons that we'd seen a Bigfoot, and they said, "You guys agreed on something? You must have seen a Bigfoot." They have the perception we don't agree on much. But from that, we went to, I got 2 of my sons and a brother. We went to the UP on a expedition with the B.F.R.O. And I didn't know it at the time, but my 2 sons, they're rather funny guys anyhow, but they did what I call a mockumentary of the look for Bigfoot. And that's the Shaw Bigfoot Project. My pointer, did you have a pointer? Did you get one?
Bruce does.
If you got, Bruce, if I could borrow yours, or if you want to put new batteries in this one. I still got a red light, but it is helpful to have one of these things.
This one's working well.
I've got batteries down there.
Just turn it on.
But I've been on 3 B.F.R.O. expeditions, different states. North Carolina, Missouri, the Upper Peninsula. And I've been to conferences in Ohio, Oklahoma, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And it's really been interesting going to different states, seeing different country. I'm sure a lot of you have watched the Finding Bigfoot series, and I'm just amazed at how many states do have wild country. And of course, I've been on many outings overnight. It's been interesting. But I do have a sense when I talk to friends and family who pretty much deny the existence of Bigfoot, that they're a little bit sorry for my wife. That's her out in the Tetons. We took a trip out west, and she's been a good sport, I have to admit. We have been married 44 years in 2 weeks. One thing, if you know her name's Carol, if you know her, do not refer to her as the Bigfooter's wife. She's never been known to be a violent person, but she could be. So watch out there. But it is funny, just in mid-April I went to the Ohio conference, and while I was down there listening to real good speakers, look what happened in downtown West Branch. I think if you made it downtown last night, I don't know, did they come this morning? Out front? Okay. Oh, you're right here. There we go. Justin Ledoux, yes, and does real good on this, what kind of art? Is sculpturing, metal art? Is it metal art? Super. Anyhow, here I'm all the way to Ohio, and she finds Bigfoot in downtown West Branch. How do you like that? So that's the way it goes. 10 reasons why I believe Bigfoot exists. after reading 51 books, I'm probably not as bad as Dr. Meldrum, because you ought to see his resume, it's about that thick. He sent me his resume, or what are you going to call it, but he has done so much. But in the 5 or 6 years I've been involved, I have read a lot. I hope I haven't misremembered some of it, but it is an interesting topic. Number 1, worldwide Bigfoot history. I think people just don't realize the history of the potential Bigfoot. You know, they aren't all the same size by any means, but there was a lot of names for them. Of course, you remember a little over 100 years ago is when we really had, we started out with trains in the 1800s, and then we got the cars. Now we got ATVs and helicopters and everything else. But the societies, I think even the Indian tribes probably only controlled maybe a couple of counties back when they were sort of in charge. And so every tribe, every local group had a name for them. So there was a lot of names. Russia has documented a lot of sightings. They got two or three mountain ranges. Then in the 50s, the Himalaya stories, they started doing some expeditions. And the funny thing there was the Sherpas, the people that lived in the Himalayas. If you ask them, does Yeti exist? And their response is, are you crazy? Of course they exist. It's just a little bit opposite of what the response we get here. Given a little bit of the history, probably most of you have heard this in China. Gigantopithecus is the name. They think there was I've heard different numbers, 300 million years ago, a fossil record. They found about 1,500 molar teeth and a few jaw bones that they think were attributed to an animal similar to Bigfoot, bipedal. From what I've read, they thought they were about 15 foot tall and weighed 1,500 pounds. Whether they did or not, that's what I read about it. Here's just a few of the names of the Bigfoot around, around the world. But just a tremendous amount of names attributed to Bigfoot type creatures. Of course, there's not so much in the European area, although in southern Russia, that's where you get some of the Caucasus Mountains and Pamirs. There's names, but Himalayas, Asia, they think that the Gigantopithecus was in this area. Actually, down in the southern areas there, the Bigfoot might only be 4 or 5 feet tall. I heard Dr. Meldrum talk about Vietnam, and those animals they think were only 4 or 5 foot tall. But the one name they gave to the ones that might be in North America, particularly, and China, are the giant Bigfoot, because often they think they're 8 foot tall, maybe 10 foot tall. They're a big animal, could weigh 800 to 1,000 pounds. The names that you see are just too much. You try to list them, and the thing of it is, I couldn't pronounce half those names anyhow. But so what I did is went through and just gave a few of the names, different continents, and some of them, like this here, is more of a spirit name. And the Indians did touch on that. But the thing of it is, maybe they're not much more than that to us. I mean, we got a lot of sightings, but they're so invisible or so hidden. It's not much difference. South America, I have got 14 names. I'm just sure there's probably a lot more names than what's on here. Surprising, Australia, separate continent, but they've got a similar type animals. I think there must have been a lot more names than I found in Africa. And of course, Europe, Neanderthal, they think they're related to them. Less likely to have so much hair, more likely to have some clothes. And from what I've read, they're more likely to be nasty. But they're not as big, they're more of human size. And the theory is that they came over the land bridge from China, 10, 12,000 years ago, and maybe a lot longer. And the thing of it is if you watch the show Finding Bigfoot, they seem to be surprised that these animals are as big as they are. But if in fact their heritage is to the Gigantopithecus, and if in fact they were 15 foot tall, some of them seen here are big animals. They might be over 10. In fact, there was a sighting just a year ago over here by Whittemore that they figured out. And the guy that saw it figured at least 11 foot tall. So, they could be very, very large animals. The interesting part in studying it, next to China is the small country of Bhutan. And it has a Bigfoot sanctuary. They know they're there. And they're preserving it, trying to prevent any decrease of that population. Of course, most people realize that Bigfoot is a vagrant. It's on the move. Normally no hut or cover. The only places I run across is the Grassman of Ohio, and in the Pacific Northwest some shelters are found. But if you have 4-inch hair and you have a fair amount of body fat, what do you need a house for? We sleep in our tents or in our houses. We need cover because we don't. Yes. Okay. In case you're hungry or bored, there is coffee and donuts back here. So help yourself. They have arrived. Okay.
Glazed or plain?
But after all that, would it not seem logical that if many civilizations and tribes all over the world have named a similar animal, often called night hairy people, that they might actually exist? I think most people do not realize this history. I mean, just this history alone is almost, I guess it's not proof, but it's sure, what did they say, where there's smoke, there's fire? I think that might apply to these animals. And then number 2, early American history, a book by Kathy Strange. She studied the American Indians. The name of the book is Giants, Cannibals, and Monsters. From what I could tell, she actually interacted with 57 different Indian tribes, even though I also read there was at least 200 different names by the Indians. Only the Cherokees had a written language. But they were feared as cannibals. To be cannibals, they assumed they were human. They were, in fact, you read some of that history, they actually had interaction with these Bigfoot tribes. I think what might have happened is the Bigfoot ate one of the Indians, and that sort of hurt their relationships a little bit. But they did fear them as cannibals. Up here to the Bigfoot Bash here a couple years ago, there was I think they were Cherokee, but they sort of represented the Midwest Indian tribes. And they had a little booklet talking about the lifestyle of the American Indian in this area. And one of the things that stuck out to me is one of their, I don't know if it was a major food source, or at least one of their food sources was wild rice. We used to have a lot of swamp until we drained it here and there. But the women and children would take their canoes into the swamp areas when the rice was ripe and shake the heads into their canoes. Well, in my opinion, from what I've read, almost always Bigfoot is in the wet areas. That's where these people would be going. Would be going right into the living room of the Bigfoot when they did that. So I think it was usually women and children that would be disappeared. The brave, I think, usually had pretty good weapons, so they weren't so much bothered with. Settlers' history. One of my favorite books is by Chad Arnett, Historical Bigfoot. He searched newspaper articles over the U.S. and Canada, and got all these stories from the newspapers of Bigfoot type interaction. Quite often there would be 3 or 4 encounters. Of course the towns were small and they were bothered. And they would get up to armed posses up to 400 people. Reading through that, at least 5 were killed. But if you're talking the 1800s, no refrigeration, what do you do with a body? Pretty hard to preserve it. A tough deal. And of course, I think if they did shoot one, they just didn't know what they were shooting, how unusual it was. The thing that I found interesting about that in reading those, and I sort of tabulated it, at least half of the time, these animals were not only bipedal, but they were also quadrupedal. In other words, they went on all fours, just like the gorillas, the chimpanzees, orangutans, which are mostly quadrupedal, but